everyone. Welcome to another episode of Out on a Limb podcast, where we have once again another special guest for you. We have Aaron Kuhn, who is a co-host of Journey to Truth podcast. You all may have seen that at some point, but if you haven't, you definitely need to check it out. But Aaron has quite a number of talents. He is a researcher, author, musician, and of course, co-host along with Tyler Kuala of the very successful Journey to Truth podcast, has been since 2019. He was a devout Christian until his awakening at the age of 25, which was kind of spurred on by discovering the likes of David Wilcock, Jordan Maxwell, Dolores Cannon, Greg Braden, and many others. Aaron and his co-host Tyler now host conferences and webinars. They create documentaries and endeavor to bring truth to humanity. So welcome, Aaron.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's so good to see you again. We met very briefly in, what was it, 2020, I believe? Or
2021. And
out in Kansas.
A town close to Wichita, Kansas, when I was dating my ex at the time.
Yeah. And at that time, I think you had just started the Journey to Truth podcast.
Actually, it had been a couple of years. We started in early 2019, so it was a couple of years into it.
Right. And I remember having a brief conversation about our backgrounds, because both of us were raised kind of conservative Christian.
Yep.
And at that time, my first book was coming out, and that's what it was all about. So start with that. Tell us about what life looked like up until the age of 25, and what were the questions that you started asking that made you start exploring all of the metaphysical stuff?
Yeah. So I kind of just hit a point in my life where the pre-approved answers and the things I realized everything I believed was just something was handed to me, and I just accepted it at face value, starting at a very young age, and I got saved when I was, 9 or 10, and was very, like, my brother, who's a few years older than me, was very active in like the youth group in the church. And so I always was like following in his footsteps, and my whole family was very Christian. So I just my whole life, I had all these beliefs kind of like handed to me, and I just like, oh, cool, that's the truth. And I never thought too much more, and that being said, I did feel the divine and, spirit, and I knew I had that knowing. But as far as all the other dogmas and things, like, as the first time I really stopped to question it and think, like, wait a second, how do I know all these things are true? I've never actually done my own research and gone on my own journey. I kind of just had that epiphany. So I just started doing that. And the first thing I questioned, which was the thing that kind of like never made sense to me, even though I just forced myself to believe it, was the concept of hell, right? I'm like, how does a all-loving, all-knowing, all-wise, all-powerful God, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, that just doesn't add up. Let me look, so I started out with the Bible. Like, let me look to see if, for one, if that's actually what is being conveyed, and if it is that coming from God, or is that coming from something else? So I did that. Now what I realized is, like, even in the Bible, it's a mistranslation. When you look at the original words that all get translated as hell, they all mean something that does not mean what we're taught it means. So it either means like a word that means the death, the grave, or Gehenna, which was a physical location, like a garbage dump kind of location, or something else. Like, none of them mean that. And then what I realized is that concept was an old pagan, kind of belief that, the Catholic Church, which Catholic just means universal. So when Rome kind of took over the Christian movement, because it was a threat to the system, they're like, okay, we got to create our own Christianity, our own church. So they called it the Catholic, the universal church. And they basically, what a perfect fear tactic to control people than to use that concept, right? Of, oh, you have to believe these things and do these things, or when you die, you're going to go to this horrible place for all eternity, is like the perfect fear and control tactic to impose on people. So I did my research and I found out all that. And I'm like, okay, well, that's clearly not why. So if Yeshua didn't come to save us from that, if that's a lie, what else is a lie? What else Have I been believing that's a lie? And why did he come? And what's really going on here with the truth of, because I still believed he was a real being, but even that I was like, well, let me look, maybe he didn't exist, but I realized he did, but that's not what he taught. That wasn't his message. And I kind of realized the truth of what he was actually teaching and why he actually came. He came to empower us, to show us that we're the same as him, not that worship me on this pedestal and give your power away to me as a savior. That's the exact opposite of his message, actually, which is what I found out. And yeah, so I don't know, through YouTube, basically at the time, which was 2012, it was very different. There wasn't the censorship, that there is now, and there was way more on there that, like, I could just search a topic and then you'd get, like, now you search a topic and you get all the, like, approved either like mainstream videos or the debunking videos or the whatever, and until you got to like search harder to find the good stuff now, right? Well, back then it wasn't like that. Like, I was getting like all the people you just said from my bio, like David Wilcock, David Icke, Jordan Maxwell, Dolores Cannon, Project Camelot, Alex Collier, Greg Braden. I remember even like Abraham Hicks, finding her back then. There was a YouTube channel called Spirit Science I was learning all these, like, the metaphysical concepts, and in more like Eastern spiritual concepts and I was just like taking all this information through a fire hose. It was all fascinating to me at the time.
Right.
I was like, wow, this all it resonated. I didn't even use that word time, but it was like, it all resonated so strong with me. I just knew this was the greater truth I've been like kept from in this box my whole life. Like, this is what they're like. To me, every religion is like a box that has truth in it, but it's like a box. So you're confined to that. And you're told anything outside of that box is either a lie or it's evil, right?
Right.
That's just what I realized. That's what I've been told, but it's not true,
That's so amazing.
And yeah, I just kind of kept going.
I love that, because first of all, you're giving our audience a lot of rabbit holes to jump down, because they love those rabbit holes.
Yeah.
A lot of our audience members are pretty new seekers. Some aren't, but a lot are. And you also touched on what I discovered as I started to explore. And luckily, you started at 25. It took me till I was in my 40s to get brave enough to start to break out of that box. But in the journey within, I talk about the same. There's a whole chapter in there about the Bible, because people use that as that resource to bang people over the head and say you're wrong. And when the translations, the language, the metaphors, all of those things determine how one interprets the Bible. And oftentimes
Absolutely.
It's incorrectly interpreted, not to mention, which I didn't get into much, the deliberate misconceptions and the deliberate sabotage of the religion by various forces throughout history. That's a huge topic. I wasn't about to touch that one.
Yeah, sorry.
But it's really nice that you were able to do that a little bit earlier. So as you started to discover all of this, what you hit on also is how much it resonates. It makes you, it lights you up. It's exciting. It's like, oh my God, I didn't know this existed. And it resonates. It makes sense. And then for me, I started to go through some anger. How did you cope with that? Or were you able to bypass the anger of the control and the lying and the manipulation?
I didn't go through, so I wouldn't call it anger. It was more of just like frustration phase was really before I really started my awakening, which is what led into it. Because I was frustrated with this being told the same things that, and I'm like, how do I even know this is true? Like, they just say these things, and this is what they were taught by people who were taught by somebody else. And I realized, like, it just, at some point, an individual has to go on their own journey to truth, as the name of the show, like, because when you don't do that, all you're doing is like continuing the line of like, this person handed me this truth, and then now I'm handing my kids or everyone else the same truth that was handed to me. Like, who's taking responsibility there to like figure it out for themselves, right? Okay. That to be sovereign means you have to do that. Otherwise, you're not in sovereignty. You're living someone else's truth, or what someone else told you, without even realizing it. And that's the insidiousness of religion, really, is that you don't even realize that's what you're doing. You don't even know you're in a mental prison or a box when you are. And, you know, like a prisoner that knows he's in prison, let's say, or even like a mental, like you can escape that because you're like, oh, I know this is what I'm told I'm being, you know, confined in, but I can, you know, leave it. Well, if you don't understand, you just think you have the truth. Well, now you've blocked yourself off from the actual truth or your own journey to truth, you know. So I was very frustrated, and that's really what I think a big part of what led me into my awakening and going on that journey. And then I was like, yeah, maybe there was a little bit of anger. I realized I've been lied to my whole life, but it was pretty short-lived, I guess. And then it was like the dark night of the soul, as people term it, where my whole identity was tied to that, right? So now I don't know who I am anymore, and my whole identity shattered. And it was scary. Yeah, it was very scary. And but that's part of the process of awakening, and that's part of the rebirth, right? Is you have the courage to, like, even though it's scary. Well, that's why a lot of people don't do it. It's too scary because their whole identity is tied to that. So it's too scary to even start questioning it or go down that path. Or if they do, they're like, nope, that's too much. I'm going to cling to what I know. This is safety, you know. When in fact it's actually the exact opposite, you know. But yeah, so then I kind of was like rebuilding myself, and it was like the, you know, caterpillar into the cocoon kind of thing, you know, whereas like I melted into this blob, and then I was like reconstructing into something like I'm a completely different person than I was before that. Completely different.
Exactly.
So yeah.
I love how you are so paralleling what I wrote about my journey as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the journey is individual, and everybody's going to come to their own conclusions, and that's okay. But it is a box, like you said, that contains some truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a matter of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like, you don't have to throw Jesus out.
But that's also what a lot of people do. And I realized that I'm glad I didn't make that mistake, because I got it. I suddenly got it why so many people go from Christian or whatever religion to atheist. So they go from one extreme to the other, and they throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I understood why, because they're burned by it, or they see the lies in it, and then they go, oh, it's all lie, it's all nonsense, I'm just going to throw it all out. And they don't realize there is there's good truth in there, and you got to figure out, just because there's lies surrounding that truth doesn't mean the whole thing doesn't mean there's no spirit and there's no, you know, greater divine intelligence going on here.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, it's a process of rebuilding your discernment. I mean, really, you strip away down to the bone of what you believe, and now nothing that you look at can you believe. So now you have to understand what true discernment is, personal discernment, like you said. In that is sovereignty. So it's rebuilding that entire paradigm of existence, and that, you know, that's the difficulty of it.
But it takes courage, like you mentioned.
Right. Yeah.
And that's another thing that I talked about in the book, is that you have to have courage. You have to be okay with deconstructing your identity, like you said, because our identities are built on our teacher's belief, our pastor, our whoever it is, our
family
parents.
we grew up in, our friends.
Correct. And so we never really know who we are. And so when you have the courage to strip that away and start over, it is very liberating, but very scary. And we have to take personal responsibility for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's almost like you got to face the dragon to get the gold, so to speak, right? It's like, okay, you want the gold, you gotta go through. It's almost like the hero's journey, you know, like Joseph Campbell, like the hero's journey. You got to go through that. Otherwise, you're stuck. You're just stuck at this one level, and then you're never going to progress. You know, you're never gonna know. You're gonna, you know, really awakening. Like the second you realize you had the epiphanies that I had, the second you realize who I think I am isn't who I actually am, or what I think is true. Like you have the epiphany that, oh, I've just accepted it. I don't actually know this is true. It's like half the battle right there or more. because now you have that separation there from the programs and you, and it's like, oh, these are programs. Like this isn't like truth. I've just been unconsciously accepting it as truth this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can make then you're forced to make a decision once you hit that point, which is what and you either can let fear take over and you cling to what you've known because you're too afraid of the consequences, or afraid of your identity, that's all you've known your whole life, your ego. The ego has a lot of fear. It wants to cling to what it knows, right?
Yeah.
Or you got to be like, I got to follow truth. I got to follow my truth and my heart, what my heart is telling me, what my soul is telling me to do. And but that's it. No one can force you to do that. That's every single person's choice, but they have to hit that point first. So like, that's also a thing. Like I can go around telling everyone all this information, but if they're not open to it, they're not open to it. I can't force them to get it. Right. Yeah. That's why we see that every day, right? We try to talk to people and it's like eyes glaze over, or they just don't want to hear, or they're just not interested, or they think you're wrong and they'll tell you why you're wrong. And no, this is why this is. And, it's like, okay, well, they're on their own journey. Everyone's in their own place, and you can't force somebody to awaken. They have to hit that point on their own.
When you understand that from the greater perspective, you and I know that you've signed a contract. And there are some people out there that have signed a contract not to awaken in this lifetime for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. And so you're beating your head against a wall if you continue to worry about it or try to convince them or whatever. It's not our job to convince them.
No, it's not our job.
And when you realize that's their contract, there's nothing you can do anyway. And so that in itself is also very liberating, to relax and realize it's their journey, not yours. There's nothing to worry about. But what's also interesting about organized religion, particularly Christianity, and trying to break free from that, you're not just breaking free for yourself from a belief system, but everything is tied to that. Like my kids went to the preschool at church. All of my friends were at church.
Yeah.
That was our nightly activity. We'd have dinner on Wednesday nights or whatever it was. And so when you break away from that, you're losing your community, maybe babysitters, you're losing everything. So it's not just about you. And that's why so many people have a difficult time breaking free from that.
Which makes it even more scary and more daunting because you're like, oh, all my friends are people that go to church and people that are this religion. And that was me. Well, for me at that time, I think what helped is also I was starting to, the Christian friends I was already starting to move away from. And I was in a band, or I was in the process of starting a band at the time with a guy that was like me, grew up Christian, but he was going the atheist route. He went that route. At the same time that I was having my awakening and going just the spiritual route, he was like, oh no, it's all BS. And, all that exists is the material 5 sense reality. And I would literally try to talk to him about all these concepts, and he would poo-poo it, and he would make fun of it. He would just not want to hear it. He'd tell me why it's not true, why it's BS, and tell me the like mainstream material reductionist scientist version of truth, according to him. So I realized very quickly I couldn't talk to him but he was like my best friend at the time. He was my closest friend at the time. But I'm like, okay, I can't talk to him about any of this stuff. So I had to like compartmentalize all that away from him. And once we formed the band with 2 other guys, they were kind of in that same boat. Maybe not quite as much, but pretty much like they didn't, just like atheists. And
I was going to say that defense mechanism for the poor guy, because once you break free from that, you feel used, or you feel disappointed in yourself that you were convinced that this was correct, and you don't want to believe anything else. And so the defense mechanism really comes up at that point.
I mean, that's why you have to go all the way to the other side. You don't want to dabble in the middle, because
what if I'm wrong again?
Right. The middle still can be a gray area, and it's still going to be confusing, and it's still going to be upsetting. I mean, what I was going to throw in there was, I wasn't raised in that Christian framework at all, but it's very similar. And I mean, though I can't say a lot of it took place for myself, but career military individuals. I mean, what you're thrust into an indoctrination right at the get-go, within the first 24 hours, you're into an indoctrination cycle. And then your entire career, no matter how short or how long it is nothing but believing somebody else's beliefs or
fighting for somebody else.
Right. Or doctrines or
following orders blindly without question.
Right. And
not think for yourself. Right.
Exactly. And then when you do get to a point, you raise up in the ranks, you get to a point where you start questioning things. Well, how come we're doing it this way? Well, that's because that's the way it's always been done. That's the way we're going to do it. And well, why? And then you get chastised for asking why.
Sit down and shut up. Just accept it. Right. Right.
And just move on. Right. Keep marking. And so
it's the order. Just follow it.
Yeah. And then you either retire, you get out after so many years of all that. And now you're staring at a world that is so foreign to you. You have no idea how to do it. So it's literally going from Christianity to atheism. There's nothing in between. And so a lot of military members that do retire, get out after a number of years, they have a very hard time functioning in the real world. So this would be a very similar aspect of that.
Discovering yourself.
Yeah, and that awakening of actual self. Yeah.
So you're in the band and you have a couple of friends and one's an atheist, and then what goes on?
They all really were, I think. He was just maybe at least the most outspoken about it, and the most atheist, I guess you could say. He was one of those very militant kind of, he went that route. So he completely did what you said, threw the baby out the bathwater and went 180 degrees to there is no spirit, there is no soul, there is nothing before birth, there's nothing after death. That's what he truly, he was so sure of, and I couldn't talk to him about it. And ETs aren't real, or there's no chance of them ever coming here. That whole, false idea, but that's a whole other thing. Or higher dimensional beings or any of that stuff. So I spent 5 years from that point till 2017, just very isolated with, I had to compartmentalize myself, right? So I had to keep all that stuff to myself. And I was doing my own research and reading books and watching videos and all that. And, even started meditating and stuff like that. And I finally just hit a point in 2017 when I was like, I just had to connect with other people at that level.
Yeah.
And
you were mentioning in your bio that you went to a couple of conferences, at which point you finally, in 2019, I guess, met Tyler.
2018, actually.
2018.
Tyler, yeah. Yeah, so the 2017 was when I went to my first. I was like, I have to connect with people. I started looking around for conferences, and I'd heard about Contact in the Desert and some of the bigger ones, and I couldn't quite afford, I think, Contact at the time, so I found this other one. At the time, I was following David Wilcock, and he had just come out with his show a couple of years before that, Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia, where he was interviewing Corey Goode about his secret space program experiences. And I was completely, that was new to me. That whole concept was new to me at the time. And I was fascinated by it. And so I was also kind of following Corey Goode at the time. And him and kind of his team, I guess, put on this conference called Eclipse of Disclosure in the Mount Shasta area during the solar eclipse that year.
Oh, yeah.
And I could afford it. And I was like, it just resonated. I'm like, that's the one. I just knew, I'm going to go to that one. So I did. I drove all the way there from St. Louis because I like driving, and I think it was cheaper than flying at the time.
Sure, yeah.
And that's when I met Chastity, who I believe you guys met. You guys know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who lives in Wichita? Yeah. So, because she was we were both in the Facebook group, and people were saying where they were coming from, and I posted a screenshot of the GPS directions, people are like, whoa. And then she commented saying, oh, hey, I'm driving from Wichita. We should meet up in Kansas and follow each other, be safer and better. I was like, yeah, sure. So that's how I met her. And she went with all 4 of her kids, which is very brave of her, in a van. So we met up in Salina, Kansas, and then followed each other the rest of the way there. And that was my first conference, and it changed my life. It completely changed my life, because it was oh my God, I was like a kid in a candy store. I was just talking to people about all this stuff and connecting with people on that level. And it was just the most amazing thing I ever, and it changed my life. So
really,
all I wanted to do from that point, from that point on, all I wanted to do was like keep going to conferences and keep meeting up with people that I was on this, on this wavelength.
So tell me about,
And
I'm curious about when you finally met Tyler and you hit it off, obviously. At what point did you decide that it would be a good idea to start Journey to Truth podcast? How did that come about?
Yeah, so I met Tyler. The sequel to that conference, the very next year, was they moved it to Loveland, Colorado. They had this like ranch there, and they called it Dimensions of Disclosure that year. And that Tyler was at that conference, and that was his first conference. And he was like there with his dad. I didn't know him at the time. Weird, you're standing around talking to people at a conference, right? And him and his dad, was in like the circle that I was in talking, and when everyone started dispersing, they were about to go on their own little hike, and I just happened to be standing there, and they're like, "Hey, we're about to go on a hike. You want to join us?" I had not met them yet. No idea who, sure. I love hikes. Let's do it. And then on the hike, they're like, "So where are you from?" I was like, "St. Louis." And they're like, "Oh, we are too. No way." So it was a total synchronicity. There's no such thing as coincidences, right?
Right.
It was totally synchronistically like brought us together. And then, so realizing we all lived in the same place, we're like, oh, we got to start hanging. Well, I was living in Kansas at the time with Chastity still, but I was coming home every few months to visit family and stuff. So the next time I came back to St. Louis, we met up and got lunch. Tyler and I were like talking, we want to do something, write a book or start a YouTube channel. I don't know what though, we couldn't really decide. I had another friend a little bit before that put it in my ear, like, you know what, you should start a podcast, because I feel like there's not enough podcasts like in this community or whatever. I was thinking like audio only, I'm like, oh yeah, that'd be, because I'm at the time video seemed,
it's scary.
I was like,
put your face out there.
But I was like, audio, I could do that maybe. Yeah.
Right.
It's just audio. So I put that idea to Tyler. I was like, what if we start a podcast? And it just like clicked. We're both like, yeah, that's it. That sounds right. When we're thinking audio only, which is what it started out as for the first few episodes. And then we didn't know how to like set up a RSS feed or, the normal audio podcast thing. So we just started a YouTube channel. That's all we knew how to do at the time. And we're uploading the like audio, the videos that were just audio with like, the picture.
Right.
And then we just like share it out on Facebook to promote. And there was, we had, no one knew who we were at the time for a while. And one episode there, like usually we get on Zoom and our videos weren't all working, or none of them were working. And then we got on, all our videos were turned on. And then our guest was like, "So we're doing video, right?" And we're like, well, no, but we're like, well, we can. Sure, let's try it. Let's see. Let's do video. People like it. And then we got a bunch of comments. They're like, "Oh, it's so much better with video." So we we just kind of thrust ourselves into video without planning on it. And it was, we were like nervous at the time. We had no idea what we were doing. And but we were just reaching out to friends we had met at these conferences and having them on as guests, and every single one agreed to do it. And we had every week, we just decided to do it once a week, every week. And we end up booking every single week, So
other than
awesome.
just finding guest friends, what did you have a goal in mind? Like, what was your mission with the podcast?
We were just having fun.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't have a mission. Our mission was just to like talk about the things we want to talk about and have an outlet to do that. And like, maybe some people will get something from it and resonate, but we did not have any expectations. We had the only thing we did was like, we made a plan to stay consistent with doing it once a week, and we stuck to that.
Right.
And that's so huge, because, I feel like consistency is like so much a factor of success for anything, because it's just like, if you're doing it from your heart and you're consistent with it, like the right people are going to find it and resonate with it, and it's take off if it's meant to, and that's what happened. It was like from day one on, we just stayed consistent with it. And it was like the universe it was like a river that we jumped in, and it was like carrying us. The universe was just like, carrying us the whole way. It felt effortless, really. And at a certain point, it was like half the time people were reaching out to us to be on the show, rather than we having to constantly find people.
Yeah, that's fun.
Like, whoa, this is amazing,
So at what point then did you realize you had kind of made it? Was it when people start reaching out to you? Or
I
when you got a
guess I
certain
don't.
number of subscribers or what?
Maybe when we hit 1,000 subscribers, I think maybe that because it was like right at the beginning of 2020, I think is when we hit 1,000 subscribers, and we were like, oh my gosh, you know, it felt so huge to us.
Right.
So we were like, wow, I can't believe we've come this far and it's like taken off. And then of course that year we go from 1,000 to like over 10,000 just in that 1 year alone.
Do you
And
find that it's an exponential increase after 1,000?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for us it was at least. I don't know if that's the case, you know.
Yeah,
for
we
everyone.
we just hit our 1,000 2 months ago, and it's slow, but I mean it's incremental. So,
But we have
we're
such
okay
a
with
great
it.
audience that it
Yeah.
almost, like you said, if you're working in integrity and this is your passion and it's fun and people can
Right.
read the truth from you, they know that you're not
Yeah.
trying to play them. Our audience is so beautiful and consistent, and they give us beautiful comments.
Yeah.
They're sending us gifts, buying our books. I mean, it's amazing. It's really
Yeah.
humbling and a
Yeah,
privilege.
people start sending us stuff too. We're like, what? I remember we went to ECETI in 2019 for their like summer conference. Tyler and I did, and you know, we had I think less than 500 subscribers at the time. We were still tiny, and somebody recognized us from the show already. We'd only been doing it for like 5 months. We're like, what? We like couldn't believe it, you know, and that was so foreign to us at the time of like somebody we didn't know recognizing us and being like,
Yeah.
oh, you guys are very true. But then that obviously increased as the years went on, and like then we started being asked to be a part of conferences in the 2020. There was a conference that was very grassroots put on by some people in the community and close to Asheville, North Carolina, called Camp Disclosure. And they asked us to do something. They left it up to us of like what we weren't speakers, but they're like, can you guys just figure out something to do to be a part of it? And we're like, sure. So the idea we came up with was called an experiencers lounge, so it was more of like an outdoor event, right? So we had a canopy tent set up with like an inflatable couch as just like a hangout area, but we also had our camera set up. And we announced to everyone, hey, anyone who wants to share any profound experiences, whether spiritual or ET or whatever, or UFO on camera, we'd love to record. And then we're going to make a compilation of everyone's videos and upload it to our channel. So we did that, and it was super popular, and it was a lot of fun. And then we've been asked to do that like 5 other times since then. We've done it
I feel like I
5 or 6 times.
saw something like that on one of your podcast episodes. You were at a picnic table. You two were at a picnic table, and it was like early on in the conference, and people would come up and say, "Hey, yo," you know.
That's what that was.
Yeah.
That's what that was. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think. Or wait, no. You might be thinking of
might have been the second or third.
that. I think you might be thinking of when we went live at ECETI at that picnic table. That was different. We were just going live and then having people interviewing
As they were arriving, they
As-
were popping over.
Right. That was a different thing. But yeah, we never did it at ECETI, but we did it at other conferences. Tyler spoke at ECETI once, and we both spoke at a conference our friends Jason and Alexis put on in Sedona in 2021, which was the first time. Actually, that was my first time speaking. Tyler had just spoke at ECETI like a week before that, and then we decided to start putting on our own conferences. So in 2022, we planned it, you know, in 2021. Tyler had the idea to do a conference about the secret space program. Like that was the subject of the conference, because we had on a lot of these like secret space program experiencers on the show, like that whole year. And we were just like, man, we should just do a conference, and have all these people as speakers, you know. Plus, we also had Laura Eisenhower that year, and a couple other people that weren't that. But yeah, so we you know, we had no idea what we were getting into. We were just like, we were excited. We're following our highest excitement, like
Correct.
people say, right?
Yeah.
Follow your highest excitement. That's exactly what we did with that, and it was like beyond our wildest, you know, expectations of being successful. And you know, people bought tickets and came. We were like, wow,
I know.
we actually did it. It's
Right.
amazing, you know. So then we did it again the next year, which was last year, and now we're about to do our third one here in like less than 3 weeks.
That's
So let me ask you, because you know James Gilliland and interviewed lots of experiencers. Have you personally experienced something significant terms of UFO
Yes.
ships or craft or beings?
Oh yeah, not beings per se, but I've had many technically UFOs. I mean, if you go to ECETI, you're going to see UFOs, or if you go to Shasta, really, you're going to see UFOs, or even like Sedona, any of these like vortexes. These
Do they
vortexes.
use the Stephen Greer protocol, or do they use a different protocol, or what?
No, I think James is very against Stephen Greer. And I get it. There's things about him I don't resonate with and don't agree with, but I generally think he's on a good mission, and I do like CE5 protocol personally, but he's not. But he does other ways of doing it, I think, his own way. But ECETI is like, you literally, if you go there, you will see, at least at night, you look up and you'll see craft flying around every single night. And you'll see lights appear on the mountain and move around and all kinds of stuff. Sasquatch is like all over the place there. Tyler had amazing Sasquatch experiences. I talk about one in my book. And so actually going back, my first UFO sighting, technically UFO sightings, were at Eclipse of Disclosure in 2017. Every night, we'd see at least a handful or more. And that was my first time seeing UFOs, and I was blown away. But then when I came back home to St. Louis, a few months later is when I had my most profound UFO sighting, which I was hanging out with a friend who was in the same community, actually. And we were just talking. We were out at night. It was January, and it was like 6 p.m., so it was dark at the time. And all of a sudden, these three lights come out of different parts of the sky, and they all like converge together and then form kind of like it looked like Orion's Belt formation. I'm honestly not sure if it was exactly that, but that's how I interpreted it, because there was like three dots that it looked like kind of like Orion's Belt. I'm like, and we're both just like, "Are you seeing this?" They're like, "Yeah." And luckily I had the thought to get out my phone and record a video, so I got a video of it. And there's a screenshot from that video in my book that you can see. And stayed there about 3 or 4 minutes, and then they slowly dispersed and went in different directions and disappeared.
Wow.
And I don't know. I'm like, my interpretation of that was either that's our star family that's saying hi and saying we're here, or maybe that's just some random other ETs that are saying hi. And
Regardless, right? It's fun.
regardless, it was some intelligence that was like wanting us to know, making an intentional formation of Orion's Belt and wanting us to know they were there. They did it right in front of us, like in the sky. I don't think that was a coincidence. So that was my most profound UFO experience.
That's cool. So,
and I've seen orbs with my naked eye a few times. I've had kind of Sasquatch. I haven't had, like, I've heard them, and then I had a smell once. My partner Amanda and I, actually, at our conference last year, close to our cabin, there was this beautiful smell that seemingly was coming out of nowhere. There was nothing there to make that smell, and it didn't happen before or after that. And it was right after there was a lot of like people were having like Sasquatch kind of experiences. So we thought, and that's a common thing we've heard, is that they can make either a very foul smell if they don't want you around,
right,
or they can make a very like beautiful, pretty smell if they're like welcoming you, or
Wow, we need to ask that channel next time. I haven't heard that before.
I've only heard of the foul smell that many that are out in the woods, whether they're hunting or whatever. That's usually what they get. And well, I mean, if you're there and you're kind of impeding on their territory and you're hunting, or whatever, I can understand
your
that.
State of consciousness and your intent.
Right.
They can sense it a mile away.
Yeah.
And if you see them, it's because they let you see them. Right.
Yes.
And they'll do that foul smell to keep you away if they sense your intent is not good, or they just don't want humans around, which is understandable. Right. They'll do that, or they'll sometimes make scary loud noises or bang whatever to scare you off sometimes.
Right. Yeah. We're headed out to Colorado Springs actually at the end of June to meet with Donna and Diana, who you also know.
Yeah.
We interviewed them here as well. But they apparently know up towards Pikes Peak all of the Sasquatch areas.
Oh yeah.
So that's our goal this summer, is to have a little encounter. And I'm pretty sure we have good enough energy that they'll show themselves. I'm hoping.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you guys definitely. Yeah.
So let me ask you, you have had so many cool topics. Some I resonate with, some I don't, just like anything. But a variety of different topics on Journey to Truth and that you've delved into in your book. And what I've noticed in this type of community, as we've gravitated away from the church and into the greater spiritual realm, is there's kind of three little groups. We have the UFO disclosure type people. We have metaphysical, spiritual, loving kind of people like that.
Yep.
And then we have the conspiracy theorist people who are into the government and all those nefarious things, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes, often, they bridge, and some people are into a lot of all of the stuff. And that you guys cover kind of the gamut.
We're in all of those, yeah.
Yeah. Your hands
We're
are
in that Venn diagram center of all of it.
Right. You're in the middle of the Venn diagram. And
So in my book, I literally made my own Venn diagram. It's funny you bring that up because I made my own Venn diagram that has all of those topics you just covered. And then in the middle, I put the full picture.
Yeah.
And in the areas where they overlap, I put truth. In the middle is the full picture because there's truth that overlaps in all of those areas. Yeah. But there's also things that aren't true that get, propagated in those communities as well. So you got to like figure out, but that's the thing. Like I exactly what you said, like throughout kind of being involved in the community that we're in, there's a lot of people that are technically in all of those groups like Tyler and I, because we realize there is truth in all of those things. And, but I also have seen the different communities that don't overlap where it's like, okay, here's all the spiritual people that don't know anything about the truth or conspiracy stuff, or don't want anything to do, or think it's BS, and don't really have ET experiences or know anything about that. And then here's the truther people that aren't spiritual at all, or if they are, they're very Christian, usually very, fundamentalist Christian, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And then there's like the ET UFO people that there's a lot of like the nuts and bolts UFO people that aren't spiritual at all and aren't.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I see how like they can become their own little box or religion, so to speak, right? Where you keep yourself confined. You don't realize there's look at other areas that connect to this and realize the truth is bigger than just this one area that you think everything is contained in,
Yeah, I was going to mention that, you jump out of one box and then you find it's like a cat. You jump out of one box and you immediately find another box to throw yourself into.
Yeah, exactly. And I see that all the time. I've seen so many people do that where they jump from the Christian box to the New Age or the atheist box, but they never really had, or the New Age to the Christian. And we see that a lot in the last few years. I've seen that a lot in the last few years where a lot of people who were like spiritual New Age types, they suddenly denounce it all. Oh, it's all evil. It's all satanic.
Yeah. That seems to be.
I was so deceived. And then they jump into the Christian box and, oh, I'm saved now. I'm like, okay, so what that indicates to me is that person didn't actually awaken. They were already in a religion, but they thought they were awake. But then what they did was they got triggered by or scared by some things in it. And then they just jumped. When that one stopped, giving them comfort, a sense of comfort and safety, they jumped into another box. That's all it was. So they went from one, like you said, one box to another. They didn't actually expand and awaken and become a sovereign being on their own journey to truth, which is what it's about. It's really easy to get caught in the traps of boxes. Yeah.
Yeah, they eventually validated their own fear of that, going from Christian to spiritual.
Right.
Validated the fear of why they didn't go to spiritual in the first place, and now they went back.
And then they went back. Right. And then they are all over online saying how demonic and evil it is. Oh my God, yoga is evil. I just saw a post the other day of
I did too.
Yoga was satanic and evil.
Yes.
I practiced it for so many years and I was so into it, and then I realized it was evil, and now I
read that same thing this morning.
Yeah.
And I thought, do I even want to respond? No, I don't.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no.
So please do not stretch because it's evil.
Yeah. It's those evil stretches, right?
So let me ask you, because you have, like I said, you guys have explored a whole bunch of stuff. Some is nice and comforting, and some is quite the opposite. Not comforting, very scary.
Yeah.
Various things that are happening that are perhaps beyond our control and that are worrisome, right? So how do you keep, because you personally have a very upbeat, I know, loving personality. How do you keep that perspective?
Yeah.
Of everything you're seeing.
That's a great question. It's not always easy, but Well, it is once you get to a point, because I did get caught up in the fear kind of aspect of the truther information initially in my awakening, even though I was like growing spiritually. At the same time, I was for the first time. Yeah. So I did, I was coming across the scary stuff that was, it was a reality though. I realized this is what is happening. And it was scary because I'm like, are we all going to be rounded up and, FEMA camps or, at the time. But what I started realizing is that there's a greater force than those beings, all of them, and all
Yes.
the non-human ones that are on the top of the pyramid there, right?
Yeah.
We have more power than them. We have to
Yes.
just step into that and awaken to that, right?
Yeah.
So when I truly got that, all the fear started going away very quickly because I'm like, they have to trick you into giving them power. They have to trick you into consenting and to thinking that they have all the power and you're powerless. That's the whole game that's been going on with humanity for thousands of years, right? Is tricking us into thinking we're these small, powerless beings that have to give our power away to things outside of us. And then they put in front of us what they want us to create and manifest, and then we create it unconsciously. And then we
Right.
get caught in fear, which creates more things to be afraid of, which create, like we submit to agendas, which then they keep creating problems so that we react to it unconsciously. So they come in with the solution to do the thing they wanted to do in the first place. Rinse, repeat, right? So that's been the whole game. So once you wake up to the game, once you wake up to the truth of who you are, it's game over, right? And that's what we see happening now with the awakening is humanity is finally hitting this like threshold of awakening where we're taking our power back. Enough of us are taking our power back and waking up that they can't keep doing that anymore to the degree like their power is fading because we're no longer giving it to them in the way that we were before, or many of us are not. And that's going to keep continuing as the ascension and the awakening continues. But yeah, so basically I got to that realization and the fear. It's like, and then I realized what is there to be afraid of anyway? Because I'm not this body. The real me is infinite consciousness.
Right.
Is an eternal, infinite being. Why
Exactly.
would I? This is a temporary experience I'm having. It's a temporary experience. It's not me. I'm not this body. I'm not anything about the physical 3D me. It's just an experience that the real me is having, which we all are. We all are that same consciousness that is having these different experiences. So like you
Right.
and I, we're the same being, essentially,
Right.
obviously there's levels to that where we each have our own soul, but then that is a part of, there's no separation basically.
That's right.
We're all, you could say, God experiencing itself from different points of awareness.
Exactly.
So
And
what is there to fear when you realize that like there is no fear? Fear is just a program,
Right.
That's all it is.
That's really the common denominator is fear. Once you can get past the
Right.
fear, then there isn't anything to worry about. And I think 2020 did that, pushed everybody into a corner to realize their ultimate fear, which was the fear of death, because people did so many crazy things because they were afraid of dying. And so
Yeah.
that is the ultimate fear that all of humanity needs to reconcile with.
That's the foundation of it, really, with humans, at least with us in this 3D realm. The fear of death, you nailed it. And yeah, that's what happened in 2020 is a perfect example of that, because look what so many people did, right? Because why? Exactly, because they were afraid of dying from a scary thing that they were told is happening by someone else.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, okay, so someone else told them something, what I just talked about earlier. They just bought it at face value without questioning or looking into it themselves.
Yep.
And not only that, but then being so afraid of it because they're so afraid of death that they will do anything that the same people that told them about the thing tells them to do,
Right.
so that they think that's going to save them or keep them safe. It's just like, I mean, that's, it just shows, it's like everyone's at a different level of consciousness. And when you're in this very low level of consciousness, you will have a lot of fear because you don't have any realization more than this body, and that you have any power greater than your seemingly, physical self.
Exactly.
Yep.
So you think you're just at the whims of, anything that could happen. And then you're so afraid because all you think that exists is this life. or even the people that are religious that do believe in the afterlife, they still have the fear of death, right? I did when I was in my Christian days. I had immense fear of death, even though I thought I knew that I would, would go to heaven for all
You
eternity.
just never know.
I still was immensely afraid of death because I was still caught in my ego,
Right.
that all it knows is this, right? And death is the unknown. So it's really just fear of the unknown, right? People are afraid of the unknown. That's why any information or anything outside of people's boxes is the unknown. They're afraid of it. It's like, oh, that's too scary. I don't know what that is, Well, death is the same thing. It's like, am I going to just cease to exist? Am I going to go to a horrible place? Am I going to, you don't know what's going to happen. So therefore you have all this fear about it. And therefore you can be manipulated by the people that understand, oh, all these people are very unconscious, and I can like so easily do something to make them all afraid and do exactly what I want them to do to fulfill these agendas, right? And to feed into right. But also, so your fear, the energy of fear feeds, like there's entities that feed off of that energy, right? So what I realized is that the control system that's set up, it's like a fear farm, right? It's to continually have us in a state of fear, suffering, and emitting those energies on top of staying suppressed and controllable. Like we're emitting fear that these entities feed off of, and that keeps them sustained. So we're like their food source. So it's like a fear farm for these, like, you could call them demonic entities. If you want, call them negative entities or whatever you want to call them. They're these, they exist in a higher dimension than the 3D. So that's another reason the trick works so easily, is that when we stay locked into 3D, we're not aware of the manipulation because it's higher. It's higher than our little tiny thing we're kept in. They feed off of it. So they're constantly, you look at what the system constantly does. You look at right now with the war that's seemingly, breaking out and like seemingly organically happening. It's not. It's all orchestrated intentionally. All the wars throughout history have been orchestrated intentionally. And they're even done on dates and like ritualistically. If you look into it and all this stuff, it's all intentionally done to harvest energy from the population. So, well, think about that. If you take your power back and you step into your sovereignty, but they can't feed off of you anymore. They've just lost a food source, right? So how do we beat the system? How do we get out of this? That's it. Take your power back, step into your sovereignty, move into the energy of love and the frequency of love, which love is fearless. Love does not fear, you know?
Right.
Because it understands what it is and understands the nature of reality, and it understands we're all one. So why would you fear yourself? You understand everything is one. Every being you experience is you in another form, essentially. It's the same energy source. So that's how karma, you could say, works, is that, well, if I harm or do something to somebody else or something else, I'm doing it to myself.
Right.
That's how the rubber band effect of karma happens, is like it's just a like balancing of that energy. Essentially, it's not like a reward and punishment thing like a lot of people think.
Right.
Just like, well, no, it's because you're doing it to yourself. So you have to experience that same energy that you put out. Whatever you put out comes back, right?
Right. So I want to mention to our audience also, as you said, the best way is to drop the fear. Stay in the heart space, because in the heart space, the fear can't exist, because it's easy to say, oh, just stop being afraid. Well, that's difficult to do. But if you continually drop into your heart space, into the truth of who you are, the fear will eventually dissolve. And as we go through 2024, there are going to be a lot more things to become afraid of that are put in front of you. And so I want our audience to understand, not to allow that to take over. There's constantly going to be some issue or incident or something to be afraid of. Don't fall for that. Well, how did you decide what you wanted to cover from the variety of topics that you guys talk about on your podcast? How did you decide what you wanted to cover in the book, and which one was your favorite?
Oh yeah, that was hard.
Yeah.
that was very difficult, because right. There's just so many topics, and there's so many things that I want to talk about and that I know about, that I'm like, what do I focus on for this book? That was hard. And
And the
actually,
book is called, by the way, Waking to the Infinite Universe, and the link is below, because by the time this airs, you can go straight to Amazon and pick up your copy.
yes,
Go
thank
ahead,
you.
Aaron.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really difficult, and you know, I cover a very wide variety of topics in this book, and I still had to narrow it down just to cover what I did cover in the book.
Yeah, of course.
So it was like, and I kept thinking, so let me just give a preface to this information. So I've been trying to write this book for like 6 years now. I've been trying to write a book for like 6 years, and for whatever reason this year, I was just like, you know what? I want to get it out now. I want to do it. I want to have it out before the conference, have it available for the conference. And then, synchronistically, literally, I text Tyler that, and he had just found out the day before that our mutual friend, Jackie Kenner, who's, by the way, speaking at our conference, is doing a 6-week book writing course that she was leading. And he's like, oh, you should, it's funny you just told me that, because I just found out Jackie's doing this book course. You should do it. And I was like, and at first I was hesitant because it was kind of expensive, and really not for what you're getting out of it. But I was like, maybe I'll just do it on my own. Like, that would be awesome, but it's kind of expensive. But I'm like, you know what? It's totally worth the money, because I knew it would help me to actually get it done and do it right, And so I did. I signed up for her 6-week like book writing course, which it was like a group of like 11 of us, and we would meet up on a Zoom call once a week to talk about things, and she would kind of guide us through it. And it was like accountability, to make sure you're gonna do it. So for the last 6 weeks, or maybe even more at this point, every day I've been writing and writing and writing. And a couple weeks into it, I started realizing, I'm like, oh my gosh, the scope of this book I'm trying to write is like so massive. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it or do it justice, covering all these topics and how they, relate and connect. I was starting to I almost decided to change what I just do, like 1 or 2 topics, because I thought I was getting overwhelmed. I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way I'm going to be able to write this in this amount of time. But I was like, nope, this is the book I feel like I need to write. I need to do this, and I'm just going to do it the best I can. And, it'll be what it's meant to be. So I did. And I'm super happy with what I came out with. Even though there's like so many things that I still like, I could have talked about that I didn't, or that I could have elaborated more on, but I can do more books in the future.
Sure.
Obviously. Yep. And I felt like this first book is exactly what it needed to be. And I'm just so happy and excited that I finally did it after all these years of wanting to get this book written. So
congratulations. So which one was your favorite topic that you covered in the book? What lit you up the most?
Probably what we just talked about, which is living from the heart space and realizing that there is nothing to fear, because we are all infinite consciousness having experience, and love is the energy of love is the only force that actually exists in the universe. So when you connect to that is when the magic happens, essentially, right? And that we came here, we wanted to come here, we chose to come here to have these types of experiences. So it's not about, oh my gosh, I can't wait to escape this 3D reality, it's horrible. It's like, no, you wanted to come, you chose to come here to have these types of experiences, because that expands your soul and expands God, essentially, source,
Yeah.
And in physicality is where really the magic happens of that expansion, because you have such a contrast, right? And you have such intense experiences here that you really can't have when you're more in the knowing of your,
of course, yeah,
right? It's like, yeah, you're in that love energy, which is amazing, but then you also can't have the contrast and the intense experiences that you can only really have in 3D or as a human. So I talk about that, and I talk about and the how heart-based creation, and how the universe is a divine consciousness that we're all a part of. So that's honestly my favorite part of it. But then I go into the ET and UFO, all that information. I talk about a lot of ET contact experiences and experiencers as well. I talk about the control system, and I lay out how it operates and how we overcome it, how we create the reality that we want. I talk about awakening and what that means. I talk about, and then, so there's a whole section early on in the book that's like my story. So it's like, I talk about what I just talked about here on the show of my story of awakening, and then meeting Tyler and starting the podcast, and then meeting my partner, Amanda, and she has a whole section she wrote of our meeting and how synchronistic and, beautiful it was. And Lily Nova, if you know who she is a good friend of mine. She wrote like a guest chapter in the book of all her ET and contact experiences and all the information, wisdom that she's gained from that. And yeah, so there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff.
It's like Metaphysics 101, sounds like.
Yeah, essentially it is. Essentially,
there are hundreds of books written on each of those chapters, probably.
Yes.
Right.
You can dive.
It's almost like disclosure in a book, and that's kind of the goal of what I was trying to go with. Like, because disclosure, people talk about disclosure, and a lot of people are talking about ETs and UFOs. Well, that's not true disclosure. That's just one aspect, right? It's so much more than that. And the most important aspect is the disclosure of who we really are, and the true nature of reality, right? So I wanted to kind of like hit home on that more than anything in the book, which I feel like I did. So
that's awesome.
But I talk about how the other stuff and how it all connects, how it's all, part of the big picture. So and it's kind of like a red pill in the book of like, oh, you want to know what's going on here? Here you go.
Right.
Here, just toss the book.
Right here.
Leave it on your coffee table.
Have a read.
But Aaron, that was a beautiful place to end. The heart space, who we really are, recognizing our importance of being human and the human journey. Fantastic way to end this podcast. We're so thankful that you came here to speak to us about your journey and about your beautiful book, Waking to the Infinite Universe, which is available on Amazon now. The link is below. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Yeah.
And thank you to our audience. We appreciate you spending time with Out on a Limb podcast. Hit that thumbs up and the subscribe button, and we will see you next time.
See you guys.